Hello, Jay Baba. So I think, except for you, Joe, everybody knows who I am. My name is Laurel Magrini.
But she doesn't put it through her.
I have a little story about deafness related to money, so maybe
What'd
you'll
you say?
enjoy that.
You tell Cliff's got a recording still.
Anyway,
It's okay.
of course I have a cold, quite congested, because, not because of any reason, except that I wanted to say that our dear Mani, does everybody know who Mani was, Baba's sister? She was very prone to cold, so maybe the body knew that and decided to solidarity. Cold, thinking of money. I just wanted to give myself a little introduction. Maybe I'll tell the little story about deafness, about not hearing well, because it's a cute Baba story. I mean, not cute, it's a beautiful thing, actually. And then what I wanted to do was to ask Sally Pearson here, who loves asking questions about the Mandali, what was it like, da-da-da. I thought, ooh, she's the perfect person to ask questions, and then we'll prime the pump and get some real spontaneous stuff, okay? So I went to India for the first time in 1975 with Glenn, who we ultimately got married 37 years ago. And I kept going for long trips and sometimes short trips. Glenn and I were residents there for 2 years. He had been a resident there before we got married. And then after we were living there on a entry visa and had to go home, we would come back for long periods of time, 4 months, 5 months. In the 90s we did that. And from the very beginning, I started working in the trust office, and so I had a lot of contact with our darlings, Mani and Erich, Rano, Balnatu, and many of the residents and visitor pilgrims would work in the trust office. But I always worked in the trust office. And then later in the 90s, I had the opportunity on several occasions to stay at Marizad to help Mani, because Casey, who was her sort of right-hand person there, went home, so they wanted someone, and she asked me. So I was very, very thrilled to do that. And then on a few other occasions, and then ultimately, it just so happened, as Baba would have arranged it, that I was scheduled to go to India because Casey was going to the States for her parents' anniversary. So it was all scheduled, and when we got there, Mani was very ill, and she died 6 weeks later. So I was there at Marizad with her, helping out with all of that. So that's just a little introduction. Let me tell the story about being deaf, because Mani was pretty darn deaf. Oh yeah, she had when she was living with. Yeah, she had her mastoid, which is back here. It's part of your auditory system. It had a massive infection when she was, I don't know, 20 or something. I don't know dates. And it basically exploded, and she's been very deaf ever since then. And some days she was a little bit more, and some days a little less. And at the trust office, Rhoda Dubash, if anybody knows Rhoda, Rhoda was also one of the helpers at the trust office. Now, Rhoda was very deaf, and she couldn't see so good, and she was adorable. I mean, she was so cute and so funny, and she always, often at the lunch table, we'd work in the morning, there'd be lunch, we'd have lunch at the trust office, and in a separate little room, and there'd be a lot of chattering and talking with Mani, very free and easy. It was a lot of fun. And invariably at the end of some long story someone's telling about something, Rhoda would pipe up, "Excuse me, what was that about?" Blah, 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 because she couldn't hear. So one of Mani's favorite stories about Rhoda Dubash was that one day Rhoda gets on the bus to go to Marizad, trust bus. She sits down next to a guy named Jeff White. And I told this, Jeff was here last year, and I told him that, this was a great story, and Mani would tell it. He goes, what story? So he was thrilled to hear it. And she sat down, and he said, hi, I'm Jeff. And she said, well, I'm deaf too. But I have a hearing aid and I wear it, and so should you. So Mani loved this story, and she'd often tell in Mandali Hall or wherever, because it just got a kick. And every time Rhoda would laugh, she got a kick out of it too. Well, the thing is that how Baba makes these stories, he makes all the stories. Mani always said, we didn't make these stories. Baba made the stories, and I've seen it happen and experienced it many times, thank God, was that, excuse me, sorry, how things came full circle. So Mani, at the end of her life, was very ill, and I don't, if you want to ask her to talk about it, that's fine, not to dwell on it, but she was very ill. And one day, she was not feeling well, and she was not even speaking much, and if you knew Mani, that's extraordinary. But she just was sitting on her bed and not looking happy at all, and she just, and there was a little, there was Shelley, Marish, of course, and Casey came back from her parents, and I was there, Heather, Janet, Devana, so there's the little group of people who were there helping Mani. And Mani didn't look good. And she just looked out and said, Perky, Perky. And she wasn't talking, she wasn't saying what is it on her mind, she just said, Perky. Oh, what is it? How can we satisfy her? What can we say to her? We don't know what exactly is bothering her. So I said, I know you don't feel perky now, Mani, but Baba willing, you'll feel better. Something like that. That wasn't it. So then Heather got the idea, get the dictionary, because this was the thing with Mani. When in doubt, get the dictionary, look it up, or the thesaurus, the antonym, she called it, and the synonyms, so I got the dictionary. I thought, oh, this is crazy. Okay, I'll go get the dictionary. I got the dictionary, and I read the definition of perky, lively, full of energy, whatever it was. No, that was not it. What to say? I mean, we all felt bad. And Casey, fantastically, out of her depths, I would say, she said, Mani, your whole life has been dedicated to Baba, making Baba happy, and being perky. And it's true. Mani, from the beginning, as a child even, everybody knew how creative, how lively, funny, how smart, all of these things that you could say were her attributes. Baba called her genius, she's so bright and fun and lively, and all your life you've been perky for Baba. And now all these years for all the pilgrims who've come, you've been perky and energetic and giving, and it's so true. I mean, every single day they had Friday off. Invariably somebody would come and visit. Every day she was giving out, whether at the trust office or at Marizad. And you've always been perky, and you did it for Baba. And now you don't feel good, and you can't do this anymore, because of course she was critically ill. And but even though you're sick now and you feel bad now, everybody, here we go, will always remember you as Perky Mani. And, I mean, I was stunned by how Casey could just give it out, and Money looked at her and she went, and she nodded her head and she laid down and went to sleep. That was exactly what that was it. So, I would never have told that story because, I don't know, it seemed so intimate. Anyway, the point is, after Money passed away, there was a gathering in Mandali Hall, people remembering Money and talking about Money, and Casey told the story. And I was a little, wow, I didn't know that you would tell the story in public, I don't know. She told the story and everyone in the hall was feeling very, the depth of the moment, and it was very, to see her go through that. And she ends the story, and everyone will remember you as Perky Money. And there's a little pause. And then there's a little sound from the corner. Excuse me, Rhoda Dubash. Excuse me, what's all this about turkey? True story. It was so wonderful that everything. And I could feel, absolutely, I could feel Monty and Bob and they're up there just having a good laugh. It was wonderful. So that was about being a little deaf. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Sally, our reporter in the field, investigative reporter. Oh my God! Baba makes everything. Only he could do that. Nobody else could.
Lord. So going back to the beginning, here it's 1975, and you're going to Mehrabad and Meherzad for the first time, and I'm wondering, what did you know about the Mandali at that point? What was your expectation? And what was your first connections with the Mandali like? What do you remember from that first trip?
Right. Good question. So I was a youngster, I was 19 years old, and I was going to Baba House in New York, and that was the period of time when our friends at Baba House and other Baba friends who we came to know, or they would come to Baba House, were starting to go to India, and quite, that was, it was really picking up, going to India. And they'd come back and they'd tell stories. It was very exciting about the Mandali. And so I was excited to go. I wanted to go and meet them, and of course to go to Baba's tomb, and just be in Baba's world. So I'll say the first time Glenn and I traveled together, and we first got to Ahmednagar with the help of Ina Lemon, a wonderful Australian lady who had met Baba and was a regular going back and forth. And the first place she took us was to Adi Kayarani's office/bedroom in the trust compound. And it was the most, and I was freaked out by India. We got to Bombay and there was flooding in the streets, and I was just freaked out, and I wanted to turn around, get back on the airplane and go away. But we toughed it out, and we took a taxi, and we walked into Adi's office, and it was the coziest scene, I have to say, because it was not only his office, it was also his bedroom, and he had the bed was at the back of the room, and there he was sitting on the bed, and Lakshman, who was a faithful servant, I mean, that's the term we use, was massaging his feet with talcum powder, and it was so cozy and just lovable. All I can say is it made me feel very good. We met Padre, awesome figure of Padre.
Excuse me, Laurel.
Yes, ma'am. Sir.
I think it might be important to mention
Yeah.
that Adi had crippling arthritis.
Yeah.
His hands and his feet.
Good. Crippling
So he wasn't
arthritis.
getting them a massage because of anything other than the health.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And also in India, massaging is really just a part of life. You do that. They often rubbed,
Yeah, but
pressed Baba's legs and feet
Right,
and
but the
stuff.
Mandali were always very careful about anybody touching their feet.
Oh,
Right.
I see what you mean.
Because Baba had told them, if you do that, you take on the impressions of
Yeah.
those people who touch your feet.
But anyway, all I can say, it was just a lovely, lovely sight, and it made me feel much homier. And maybe a day later, she took us back to the trust office, and it was Adi's birthday party. Birthday party means that Mani, Erich, and Rano were over by Adi's office, which later became Pat's office, where you would register and stuff like that. And they were having little snacks on the leaf plate and all that. So we met Mani. I just remember, hugging a cloud. That was about it. And Erich, I said, hi. What's your name? Laurel. And he looks and said, Moral. No, not moral. Anyway, and Rano, and she sat down and talked to us. She was the New Yorker, so she liked to talk to New Yorkers. And then the next day we went to Marizad and kept meeting different Mandali. And then, so then to meet Mara, all I can tell you is that the chairs on the veranda were there, and they're a little deep, and you're kind of at an angle. And I was very excited about meeting Mara. And we were waiting, and then finally she came out the door, and it was just thrilling, and I couldn't quite get out of the chair. Finally got myself out of the chair, and she was so just very, very sweet, and she gave us a tour. Were you there, Glenn? Of Baba's bedroom. Yeah, oh yes, it was real. Yeah, the Baba's pillow, and this is where Baba's lotus feet. He put his lotus feet. She showed us all around the room, and she showed us Baba's face and the hair. And she was just really sweet, and I think she liked, young girls and all of that. And she eventually tried to teach me and some others who I don't remember who they were, some song that Baba liked that was in the vernacular, is all I could say, Hindi or Urdu or something. And then we went out, Shelley Steiner, we bought saris, so we went to Marizad, and she wrapped the sari for us, and Mara said to me, do you have holes in your ears? And I did. I had pierced ears, but I had stopped wearing my earrings. I went, yeah. She goes, why aren't you wearing earrings? Oh, just, she said, go here? Oh my God. Get a needle. And oh my God. Because I'm very squeamish. Very squeamish. And she sat me down in her chair, her big chair on the thing.
Wow.
And go here. Got the needle. And so you could see the hole, and she was trying to get that with the blunt end, I think. And I could hear her go. I was trying to be brave. I really was. But, the autonomic, sympathetic nervous system took over. And I must have been like sweating, kind of getting a little. And she looked up at me and she goes, can't get it through. Go here, get the glycerin. So go here goes to get glycerin to dip the needle so it'll go through. And I'm like, yeah, just. And finally she looks up and she goes, oh, are you queasy? I go, yeah, I'm a little queasy. She goes, oh, you should have told me. That's okay. She didn't do it. It turns out that she was also very queasy. She hated getting shots. And if she had to get a shot in Baba's time, Baba would hold her hand while she was getting the shot. And so I was happy to hear that, I had misery loves company, so I was glad to know that even somebody like Mara could be queasy. Anyway, so she ultimately gave me this little thing, but it was you know how you have earrings that are not pierced, but you press them on?
With clip-ons.
Clip-on. So it was like a little clip-on nose thing, because that's considered greatly beautiful to have a nose, you have your nose pierced and you have a little gem there. And I did have it, and then like an idiot, I lost it. Anyway, so those were some impressions I had of some of the Mandali. But then one day I came up to Erich, because I saw Jacko was working in the trust office and other people working in the trust office. We were there for months. We were there for 4 months. 120 days you had on your ticket. And I said, I had to do something. I couldn't just not do anything. I said, can I work in the trust office? He went, yes. He was very happy. So I went and I started working there. And then ever since, I always worked in the trust office, except for one occasion, one summer, I spent more time at Marizad and didn't work at the trust office. And then at the end of the trip, I was going around to say goodbye, and he said, are you coming to say you're going to come back and work in the office? I went, oh, no, I'm going home. But then after that, I always worked in the trust office. And do you have any particular questions about that?
Yeah.
I was going to get Andrea here, because Andrea Winsemer was one of the trust office regulars. And we were going to talk about it, but she's involved with something else. Andrea, you're not here, are you? No? Okay.
What was it, how did you start, and what jobs did you have, and what was your relationship with the Mandali when you were working there?
Okay. So the very first assignment I had from Money, which I botched, she had an old address book, her own personal address book, and she had a new one. And the idea was that I would transfer, I would write the new addresses in the address book. And somehow or another, I didn't do it right. And what I really should have done was asked her, how is it, that you want me to do this? And a little tendency in me is to never want to ask anything. I just kind of barrel ahead and do it, or I just hate to ask. That reminds me of another one that I'll tell you. And she looked at it and went, oh, no. It was wrong. I went, oh, I did it wrong? Yeah. She put it aside. Well, that was 1975. Sometime after Money died, not Erich, your name is Glenn, right? Yeah. Glenn and I went to we went to India, and we went into the trust office. Now they made it into a museum, basically. It must have been after Erich had passed away too, so after 2001. And I was just walking around, and they've kept everything, all her little tchotchkes that are on the desk. She had toys, and she had photographs under the glass, and all these pets that were named Money. People would send her the pictures of the dog and the cat and the bird. She had them all under there, and friends of hers, and she had all these just things that she would kind of play with while she was working. And plus all her notebooks and her this and her chops. I like one thing I really loved about being there is learning all these words, these sort of Oriental, the old Eastern words for things. So her stamps that said Mani Esarani Chairman, Avatar Mahabharata, chop. That's a chop. So, she'd have to stamp something and she would chop. Anyway, all of that was still there. Everything was there. All the, one thing that we did in the trust office whenever people came as pilgrims, you had to bring your little photo. Well, not only on Pat's side, where they had this book that went to the police with all your information, but on Mani's side, on the trust office side, a little card was kept for each person with their photo and their address and the year that they came. And some people had log things. It was crossed out and many stapled together, and some didn't. And that was the address card. And she had a box, a little cabinet of photo cards, and that photo would be on there with your name and all of that information. And that was something that we would do. And why am I saying that? I have no idea. But anyway, Oh, all of that is still there. It's still there. If you're ever in the trust office, you can look up your card. It's still there until they archive it all. But for now, it's still there. So Glenn and I was just walking around the good old trust office and feeling very nostalgic and looking at all the thing. And then I came across what? That address book, still there. Still, the old one and the new one where I had made a few entries that I did incorrectly, not enough space or something like that, still there. I love that kind of thing. I wanted to say, the nice thing, you worked in the trust office, unlike any other office in the world. The Mandali came in the trust car, honk, 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 and whoever was there for the day, and Pat and Irene and Mary, whoever was in their office would come down, greet the car, and greet whoever was there, Monty, Erich, Rano, back then, Balna too. Everybody embraced, hugged. It was just an incredible thing. Then Monty would, if it was, and she was there most days, I think she had one day off, I can't remember all the details. Okay, see. There was always a garland, it was ordered, a small garland, and she would climb up on this wooden step stool, and she would garland that beautiful big portrait of Baba that's there, she would garland it. Then every so often, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, again, the details somehow have escaped me, we'd have ready these little sponge cloths, a damp one, a dry one, little cloths, and Monty would wash that picture. And she would, and Ahmednagar, it was dirty. She'd go across the top, very dirty, chocolate cake, it was just absolutely dirty. Because Ahmednagar means dust. And, but as she would, Baba's face, she would take the cloth, she'd kiss it, and she would polish that, and she would always say, peanut butter kisses.
Oh.
So sweet. Monty had a way of, she could find any Baba photo, she would, and not only her, all the other women, and of course, I can't speak for the men, but absolutely sanctify it. There was a place, it was a Baba place, but it was a little grungy, it was a little dark, it was a little, I don't know, for me, this is my opinion. But they would go in there and they would bow down, kiss the picture, whatever it was, and you felt like, oh, Baba's really there. They would do that. They would have, because they had, that was their life, their love. Every day when she went back and forth to Marizad, on the road is you may have noticed that there's a lot of fruit wallas, and there's a shrine. It's of a Muslim saint. It has lattice work. And you see those kind of things all over India. Every time, and I'd be sometimes in the car. In the later years, like if I was staying at Marizad with her, so I'd go back and forth to the trust office with her. I'd be in the car with her, so that's how I saw this. Every time the car passed that shrine, she would bow down. And she had the name of this saint written out on her purse. And he must have been, Baba must have said something about the saint. Glenn, do you remember?
I hear that Baba would do that, so that's probably Monty carried it on.
Oh, if Baba did it, then of course she would too. Such
That's
respect.
right, he would do that. And
Oh my God, it was fantastic. There was something that I thought of and now I forget. Anyway, doesn't matter. Got another question?
What do you think it means, peanut butter kisses?
She loved peanut butter.
Ah.
It's true. She loved kisses. She loved Baba. That's all I could say. What could be better than a peanut butter kiss? That's all I can think of. It was every time. I don't know where it came from, but I always loved that so much. Anyway, after my first little boo-boo with the address book, didn't matter. It never got corrected, but we just went on to other things. And at the trust office, we did a variety of things, mostly very mundane, typing out reports, the veterinary report from Maribod, and typing out the budget, and all kinds of that kind of thing. And then there was a lot of correspondence. Of course, Monty and Erich had tremendous amounts of correspondence. They had trust correspondence, official correspondence, and relating to whatever the work was at the trust and to donations. She would always write to people who made donations, and we would type out the copies because all of that was saved in the files. And then there was personal correspondence. People would write her personal letters. The only truly personal correspondence that she had that nobody else read was from her family. Everybody else's got shared with all the Mandali. That's how it was. So if you wrote to her, everybody read it. That's how Baba did it. That's how they did it. And the names were ticked off until everybody read it, went back, and it got responded to or filed or filed.
But there were letters marked personal,
There were letters marked personal.
and
But-
everyone didn't read those.
John Connor got a telegram one day. That was one of the things about living in the trust office, because Glenn and I, when we were residents, we ultimately lived in the trust compound. That was not Maribod, but in the trust compound. It was great. We loved it. So one of the duties was when the telegram guy would come on his bicycle, because those were the days of the telegrams, you had to receive it and then hold it for them to, when they came to the trust office, or send it out to Mariside, or convey the message somehow or other. So one of the telegrams came, and if you've ever seen the telegram, it's got all these cryptic things, letters and numbers all over it besides the message. And apparently in there it was PC. He didn't know it meant personal and confidential. And he opened it up and, well, he got a little hammer for that because it was personal and confidential. But that was from Monty's family member. You see, if I wrote a letter and said personal confidential, it wasn't. It got shared with all the Mandali. They shared all of this stuff.
It was all the monthly, yeah.
Yeah. And they got all kinds of correspondence, and I do remember Monty reading one that was addressed to Bao, and it was pretty personal. And she looked at it and she goes, oh, I'm glad I don't have to answer that one. Because it was addressed to Bao, so he had to answer.
Now, would she dictate to you the answers, the responses? Or how did that work?
So that kind of, either she would write her own thing and we'd just type it out. Erich dictated a lot of things, and you would write it out, type it up, he'd look it over, make a rough draft, and he'd look it over, and then you'd make a fair draft plus 2 copies or however many. This was manual typewriters and literally carbon copies with carbon paper. It was a lot of fun. No computers, no electric typewriters. And so he did that a lot. You'd sit at the back table with him and he'd go through the correspondence, and if he had a reply, you'd sit and sort of scribble out the answer and go through that process, and then he'd read it over and sign it. And with Monty, she would either write her own or she'd give you kind of a sketch of what she wanted to say, and you would write out something and she'd read it and change it or whatever. And eventually, with some of the things, she would ask me or Heather, and maybe others, I can't speak to that, to write the answer. And so we would draft up a reply, and usually light casual things, and she'd read it over, and if she liked it, good, or she would change it. But you'd get at but she always read everything. Also, that's how Baba operated. He had them write the responses to things, and he would read them over. So anything that Erich or Mani or any of the Mandali did that's how they learned it from Baba. And I always I felt that the more I got to know them meaning observe them, and I'd see their different personalities and different things they did, and some of them were a little mind-boggling, some of them were traits, some were adorable, and some were a little I always had the feeling they got that from Baba. That was their whole life. They lived with Baba from young life, all these people. And they learned it from him, and that's all I could say. Each one was a different facet of his personality. Absolutely, there's no doubt. Hello. I can stop talking.
I'd like to
Yes.
open it up to anybody who has a particular
Absolutely.
story they want to share, and then we can come back to you.
Yeah.
A lot of my exchanges with the Mandali were kind of pivotal in my inner life with Baba. And some of you have heard this, but I was in Mandalay Hall, this is maybe in the mid-70s, and we were all in there, and I said to Erich, what if I went last night to a party? I had a wild time, and I got drunk, and I did a lot of things that I knew Baba wouldn't be happy with. But I did it anyway. And now this morning I'm hungover. I got a headache. I feel miserable. Now, I don't want to burden Baba with what I did last night. I'm willing, it was my own choice. I'm willing to suffer it myself. Does Baba want me to give him my hangover? And Erich is over there by the window, and he says, yes. Give me your hangover and the embarrassment of having such a the embarrassment of having such a meager gift to give your beloved. Well, will inspire you next time to have something more precious to give him. Always give whatever you're feeling deep down to Baba. And I said, but still, Erich, isn't that a burden to Baba? And Erich said, brother, it is a greater burden to Baba to withhold anything from him than to throw on him the worst of yourself. And that was emblazoned on my heart. It is a greater burden to withhold anything from him than to throw on him the worst of yourself. So that was early on, I was young. So Baba has gotten everything, good, bad, and ugly, of me. There were a lot of exchanges like that were pivotal in my life. Well, this was one right around the same time. I was Mara was saying goodbye to this lady who was going back to the West. She was there on her veranda, and I was just saying goodbye for the day. I was going back to Mehrabad. And Mara said, I'm just listening on, she said, sometimes we feel very empty, and I don't know if it was depressed. I can't remember what the second word was. But we know Baba wants us to be cheerful, so we make efforts to be cheerful. And inside I'm thinking, wow, she has been with Baba all these years, the beloved of the beloved, next to love itself, and she feels empty sometimes. Then love must be something different from what I thought. Because up to that point I thought if she hadn't mastered the experience of having a joyous heart all the time, then love must be something different from that. So I felt that I shouldn't worry about how I feel. If beloved of the beloved can feel empty. See, I used to feel like if I don't feel that warmth and joyousness in my heart, then I've done something wrong. I might feel it in the morning, and then later in the day, what did I do wrong that I lost it? But after that, I never worried about how I felt. You know, it's like the moods are like the seasons. You just can't just stay in springtime all the time. You've got to move to summer and fall, and then winter, everything is empty again. But love is something behind that. And so she really saved me years of fretting over how I was feeling. And Baba said to Arnabas, I didn't ask you to feel me, I asked you to love me. You know, which is the way I took it. Like, we could all be very, very depressed here and everything, and someone could suddenly drop with a heart attack, and we would run over there and try to get them to the hospital. So love wasn't dependent upon her mood. Love comes from a different dimension. So that was something very valuable when I was young, to hear that.
So this is Rhoda Dubash. Thank you for reminding me of Rhoda, because there are a lot of people, I found out later, didn't know Adi and Rhoda because they were very quiet. They lived in Pakistan. And of course, there's always a question of, I mean, only Baba can say who is Mandali, but they were residents. They lived the last years of their life there. I was married at the time, first trip to India, 76. We became very close to Adi and Rhoda for this reason. They told us this, we had lost a child. And we were with Mansari, and Mansari told Adi and Rhoda to tell them this story to us. So they were living in Pakistan. Baba sent for them. They came down wherever it was, whether it was Naga, Pune, I don't know. And asked how they were, asked they had 2 boys. And Baba asked them, he said, Rhoda, can I have one of your sons? And Rhoda was so happy, because in those days, anybody, if Baba would ask that, they thought it meant they would go live with Baba as one of the Mandali or one of the residents. So Baba said, can I have one of your sons? Oh, yes, Baba. She was so happy. He said, I'll let you know when. They went back to Pakistan. The boys were young at the time. Sometime later, months, it might have been years, Adi receives a telegram from Baba that on such and such a day, at noontime, I remember the hour, he is to sit and repeat Baba's name for 1 hour, quietly, and for no reason to change his position or to stop that. Time comes, he is doing that. One of his sons falls off the roof, right in front of where he was sitting, and dies. And Adi Rhoda said they realized at the time what Baba meant when he said, can I have one of your sons?
Yeah.
How did she take it?
You know what, I would say, and this is part of the reason we became very close with Adi and Rhoda, because we lost a child, an infant. And Mani gave us the most incredible explanation, and this is his baby. And when we told Mani, and this was a baby that was named by Jal, by Baba's brother. And when we told the Mandali, we went right after that to the trip to India. The child died in February 76. We were in India that summer. And Mani said, oh, he only had a few impressions to work out and he was gone. He's fortunate. And it changed completely how to look at the death of a child. You know, it's not like it's a tragedy for the survivors, but for the child itself, only a few impressions left, and that was it. they got a cable from Baba to come immediately as soon as they can. Now, of course, they had to take arrangements for the child, the surviving child. Audie went ahead and went on before Rhoda could leave because she had some delay with the child. And I remember my wife at the time sitting there going, "That's terrible." And Rhoda looked and she said, "Why? Why is that terrible?" He said, "Audie didn't wait for you?" And she said, "Oh, my dear," she said, "when it comes to Baba, it's every man for himself."
Yeah. Single file.
Single file.
That's what they said.
My experience with Mandali is they would sometimes give completely opposite explanations. And what it did for me is it caused me to realize that they are not the avatar. They were, to me, they were the bridge, because at that time there was almost nothing published. Anybody can go online now and they can find out for themselves what Baba said about food or diet or exercise or meditation. But in those days, we had to ask them because there was nothing published. So this was almost drove me out of India. Was married, just had the death of a child. We're in a Shiva Lingam, if people are familiar with the Shiva Lingam. Shiva is the god of creation. So the Shiva Lingam temple is a small room, and it's got this huge phallus that's about chest height, and about waist height is the vaginal lips. The worshipers come in, they break a coconut over this phallus. The coconut milk drips, they collect the coconut milk and drink it, and that's part of their sacrament. So Erich takes a group of us into this room, and I'm standing across from him with this phallus between us, chest high, and he's explaining all this to us. And Erich says, unless and until you give up sex, you cannot enter the path of love. And I thought to myself, I'm out of here. I was 35, we had just suffered the death of a child, and we comforted each other intimately. So we would, in those days, we stayed at the Pilgrim Center, or Lower Mehrabad, Monday to Friday. At the lead Friday, we would go to Pune and spend the weekend with Jal, Baba's brother. And Jal had a way of saying, he wouldn't know. He said, "What's happening? You look troubled. What's bothering you?" So we were actually going to change. We were scheduled to be there 3 months. We were going to change our reservations and leave and come back home. We said, "This is not for us." And John said, "What's troubling you?" And I explained to him. I said, "John, we have to give up sex, or we can't enter the path of love. It's not what I'm signing up for." He said, "Who told you such nonsense?" I said, "Erich." And I'm quoting John, Baba's brother. He said, "Erich is new to Baba. He doesn't know what he's talking about." So he then went on to say, he said, "You're married," he said, "with your wife, you can do anything." Okay? So, I think what Laurel mentioned before about each of the Mandali representing a different aspect of Baba's personality, that's what I felt with him, is that Erich was holding up an ideal that he obviously was at, but everybody else, I mean, there were a lot of people who were very tolerant of Westerners and what we did, married, Bao was a grandfather. So there was no virgin birth there.
Oh. I have nothing to say on that topic. I have to say that I loved Mani, and she liked me a lot. She did. Oh, no? She liked me. And one of the things I believe that she liked about me is that I'm kind of shallow. And it's true.
She's very good at crossword puzzles.
Laurel, we can't hear.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, I won't say that loud again. I won't get
We want to
that-
get that on tape.
And one day when I was staying at Marizad and being Lonnie's little right-hand person, I came around the corner, there she was, and she said, Murgy, because that was what she called me, Murgy. Murgy means hen, chicken, hen. Anyway, that's what she called me. I loved it, and I prefer that to my given name, but she said, Murgy, you're light, you're just right. It's like, oh, great, that's fantastic. So for her, that was nice, nothing too heavy. I mean, conversation-wise. And one time, but there I was, trying to help her out, thrilled to be there, because I loved her so much. She said, you don't talk enough. I don't talk enough? Oh, she says, Casey talks a lot. She's always telling me stuff. I went, okay. So I tried. I really tried to comment on anything and everything and whatever it might have happened to. And then after a while, she said, oh, okay, it's all right. She was very cute. And Miney was, well, part of her role was to train people, spiritual training. I think she had been doing it a large part of her life before the Westerners came, just whatever. I just think it's something, and certainly as the chairman of the trust, as Baba's sister, she did, and she could. I've heard a lot of stories about that she was harsh with people, she was strict with people and all that, but she wasn't like that with me. Only on very rare occasions did she have an off word towards me, and maybe I couldn't take it, I don't know why, but I'm just glad that's the way it was. And we always had she was very loving to me, and I'm thrilled about that. So there I was trying to help out. I'd never been around her that much. I would be in the trust office, and the trust office was a great atmosphere, even though she was very busy, a lot to do, tons of correspondence, plus official business, plus people dropping in all the time. She was very busy, but she loved being there, I think. I felt. She really did. It was her domain, and she had her adoring crowd around her, the gals at the trust office and some of the guys. And that was wonderful, and wouldn't have it any other way. With the residents, she was, she could be very strict and whatever, critical, because she wanted to train them to be with Baba, and that was the thing. And I heard her, I was sitting there, and she was talking to somebody, is this the way? Is this how you would do it for Baba? It was about something very minor. I mean minor, that person had collected flowers to offer for money to put in Baba's room, and one of the leaves was not up to snuff. It was a leaf. And she, she let that person know, this thing you're giving to Baba, and I don't know if that performance was for my sake, because I was sitting there and nobody else was there except Money and the other person. And the other person, wonderful person, just said yes, yes, yes. Anyway, and she said to that person, why am I saying all this? Because do you not want me to say all of this? I want you to be ready to serve Baba, Mayor Baba. And the person was not fighting me, just saying yes, yes, yes. So, but to me, she was really very, very sweet and loving. Anyway, but I was trying my best, and I was a little bit of a goody two-shoes because I wanted to make her happy and do whatever I could do. And it was not a pilgrim day. We're standing, I remember it, just to set the scene. the back of Mandali Hall outside, you know those corrugated tin doors. And she said to me, and I loved, one of the many things I loved about Marty was her, as I say, this wisdom of the old East or something, I would call it. She said, Margie, you know what the poet says? You must live your life in such a way that God is happy and the devil is not unhappy. I went, oh. Okay. I love that. And it's some old poem or saying from way back when, and in that part of the world. So I knew I was being a little too good. You don't want to be too good. You don't want to be too bad. Strike the balance. It was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, experience to do that, to try to get it right. And I think on occasion I did. What else?
How are people doing? Want to continue or you want to
3 more hours.
stand and stretch? Are we?
I'm kind of like Glenn, I can never get tired of Laura's talking.
Yes.
I'll tell one more, and then I'll shut up.
Yeah, no.
But there's a lot back in there. What's your name? Glenn was talking about Monty and Erich.
What did you
Monty
say
and
about
Erich.
turkey?
And Monty was going, huh? And Erich was like, gotta keep him in his body. But I had the opposite experience. And as I said, she was 99.99% of the time was really, really sweet and loving to me and fun, and the devil was not unhappy and God was happy. So we first got to India. We're at Marizad. I'm just this dumb 19-year-old, kind of. At this point, I loved India and I loved the Mandali, and I was over the initial freak out. And so I was just goofy and just so happy. And for some reason, I don't know why, I mentioned to Erich, back in New York one day with our Baba House pals, we were playing a game. I'll be Mary, you'll be Monty. And then they said, you'll be Khorshid. I go, okay, I didn't even know who Khorshid was. I've never heard the name. I had no idea who this person was. I hadn't met her, never met her. And I don't know why that would have come up in conversation, but it did. And I said, and yes, and I played Khorshid. And Erich looks at me with this, they had wonderful facial expressions. I loved Erich very much. He looked at me, this disgust, and he said, you're a young, beautiful girl. Why do you want to be an old woman? And I would just went, I did not register the young, beautiful part. I just, that feeling. And he stalked off. And I was just standing there going, huh? And because it rang true. You see, the thing is, something about that rang true. But I was in shock. I don't know why, but I was. And all of a sudden, Monty comes running over. I mean, running over. This is in the front veranda in front of the Mandali Hall. And she comes and sits me down in front of the blue bus, those 2 chairs, and she sits, and she's here, and here, I'm there, and she's like, she's patting me now, because she sees, Erich just totally blew my mind for some reason, it did. And she goes, you know what Baba said? I'm like, no. She says, Baba told us. Now this is 1975, so a little early. Baba told us, you'll see my children. You'll see them. Gems. Gems. That's what Baba said about you all. It's like, oh, wow, it's really sweet. So she was comforting me because she could see that Erich said something that just freaked me out, and it was so sweet. And just as a little aside, she would tell that story very often about Baba said, you'll see them, my children. Gems, like on a gem on a... And as years went by, it changed to, You'll see, my children. Some of them are
Well, also another, I don't need the mic, another
Let's say
marriage
it loud.
to Laurel. We were at the end of a 5-month, 6-month stay, and it was during the first Iraq War. And so Laurel was a little nervous. She was nervous about the flight home. And she said, I'm a little frightened about this. We have to fly home. So on the way out, I said, Eric, Laurel is afraid of the flight home because of the Iraq War. Can you tell her something? Well, it's so obvious. You have to die sometime.
The thing is, I expected him, of course, to say, no, they're there, Baba will protect you, or whatever. He says, well, it's so obvious, you have to die sometime. And you know what? It made me feel good. I don't know why. It just did. So.
It's amazing. This seems like a Mani afternoon, but this story came to me very soon after I entered the room. And I was in the back during lunch hour with Mara. I had asked her something, and we were working on a little project. And Mani did not know I was back in the back. So it was actually inside the living room, just inside the door. And no, actually it was just outside the door on the where Meru used to sit. We were sitting there, and Mani came out. And again, as I say, she didn't know I was there, and she had not been well. But this is quite before she passed away. And she came out. I had never seen her like this. She came out, she was shuffling, she was blowing her nose. She looked absolutely terrible. And as soon as she saw me, she went like that. And there was a total sense of well-being and radiance and perfection of being. And then for some reason, she looked and saw that I was sitting with Mara, and she turned and she just kind of collapsed again and shuffled on. And it blew me away. From my experience of this was that there were so many times when they must have not felt well, but because we were there, they were going to show their best. And I thought of the phrase while I was listening to people's stories about let a smile be on your lips, even if your heart is being cut to bits. And I just felt honored that she was comfortable enough to have gone back to the way she really felt. But it was an enormous experience for me to witness this. It was just instant. She totally changed her beingness. Yeah, working. Yeah. It just, I haven't done very well with being that way, but it's a huge example to me of a template of how to be if you're wanting to serve your master, Mayor Baba. Does anybody else want to share?
I think it's pretty much time. You okay? We can do this again.
Yes, let's do it again.
All right. We'll definitely schedule another Remembering the Mandali. And we just have so many stories to share.